There are so many misconceptions about alt season. In today's video, I'm going to be telling you the truth about crypto alt season, when you can actually expect the real alt season this cycle. And I've actually gone through all the data that you could possibly need to understand historically when alt season actually hits. And I've actually run a custom script which looked at past cycles, looked at periods of altcoin outperformance, looked at periods of Ethereum outperformance, and has actually calculated when we can expect alt season to kick in. This script holds the key to the true meaning of alt season, because I see it flying around a lot. And yes, sometimes I'm guilty of using alt season, in the titles and thumbnails, etc. It obviously gets a lot of clicks. It's obviously a big topic in crypto. But today, we're going to cut all the fluff and just go straight to the data and look at actually when alt season historically triggers, how you can prepare for this eventuality. And I think this is going to be a really valuable video for you guys heading into the next few months, amidst what is, I think, for a lot of you, a confusing market. I am getting a lot of comments and I'm seeing a lot of talk on Twitter about, when are alts going to run, what's happening with the market. The reality is they've already run very hard, but we are now seeing Bitcoin dominance increasing again. So we do need to discuss the current state of altcoins today. And I think it's going to be a very, very, very alpha-packed video. I'm pretty proud of this research that I've done, and I think it's going to be very helpful for you guys. So let's cut the fluff and pretty much get straight into it. Bitcoin has been performing really, really well in terms of the Bitcoin macro trend. It's still looking really good. Obviously, yesterday wicked up to 108. Now it's sitting back at 104. We are seeing a bit of a general de-risk because of FOMC. We often see a sell-off prior to FOMC as people just start to de-risk a little bit. I think also a lot of people are going on holiday right now and they just want to de-risk before Christmas. And this makes a lot of sense because if you're going on holidays with your family, for example, and you're a big investment manager or you're managing like massive positions, do you really want to be stressed about being over-leveraged heading into this period? A period of chop, a period of historically low volatility. We know Christmas week and like New Year's Day, like these aren't high volume trading periods for the market because people are with their families. They're switched off the market. So there's like this mini blackout period. So it does make sense that the combination of FOMC and the Christmas period has resulted in a bit of sell-off, more so for altcoins as opposed to Bitcoin. And that is reflected in the dominance. Although dominance has had a major shift towards the alts, it has started to come back and retest this moving average on the 3-day here, as we have seen some de-risking of altcoins and Bitcoin catching a little bit more of a bid in respect to altcoins. FOMC is going to be later today. That may impact markets, but typically what happens is you see the de-risking beforehand. Obviously, if there's any sort of shock during FOMC, that could result in a market move in either direction, but I'm not going to focus on that today because today I want to give you longer-term directionality in regards to alt season and my entire thesis to do with alt season. You can also see it's not just isolated to crypto. Stocks are also experiencing a bit of a sell-off. Now, in terms of altcoins, if you go onto the daily chart, you can see a lot of stuff is down. In fact, most altcoins are down. So if you're looking at your portfolio right now and you're saying, Miles, XYZ coin is down, like why is this happening? Just firstly accept that every coin is down. Even the biggest, most popular coins in the market right now, like Hyperliquid, that were absolutely pumping, are down. Even coins that have been running a lot recently are down. All of the normie coins that were pumping over the last few days are also down. So it's not just limited to your portfolio or my portfolio. Most coins in the market are actually down, and this is a general market de-risk. So if you're worrying about your specific portfolio, I wouldn't necessarily be worrying right now because everything's down. But if you're worrying about the efficacy and when alt season is going to begin, that is a much more genuine concern, which we're going to discuss today, because that actually holds the key to whether you should be taking advantage of this dip or whether you should also be de-risking ahead of Christmas. Now, looking at the statistics to do with the Christmas period historically, you can see for the S&P, typically the rally happens post-Christmas. The biggest gains tend to happen after the middle of the month, which we are now entering that period, and the biggest gains actually happen towards the end of Christmas. So if we are to see a bounce in the next few weeks, it'll probably happen in that last week of December/early Jan. So just keep that in mind. The other thing is crypto historically performs better after Christmas. You can see a 3.7% average return in the post-Christmas period as opposed to the pre-Christmas period, which is much lower at 0.8%. So if there was ever going to be a sell-off, it makes sense for that sell-off to happen pre-Christmas before a rally post-Christmas. But we are going to get into the data as to when I think the big rally is going to begin, not just a short-term bounce. Now, there has been, and this is what really triggered me to make this video, a lot of commentary on Twitter recently about whether we're even going to see a massive alt season, when that can occur, and what the trajectory is for altcoins. You can see people now starting to ask the question, are fresh retail flows alone capable of finding a full-blown alt season in a new market environment? There are also questions, look, we went into this alt season territory for a few days, but it was pretty much like the earlier part of the year where we went for a few days and then we ended up retracing, just like in 2022 as well. We haven't had that sustained multi-day period. I think it was 88 days like 2021 of alt season. Is that going to happen this cycle? Or was that it? Was that simply the fake out? Well, this is where the language gets really differentiated, and this is a very important point I'm about to make. Yes, this is an alt season index, but the index that you look at, the definition of that index impacts whether it's actually a true alt season or not. So this index is simply a calculation of altcoin performance percentage-wise on centralized exchanges versus Bitcoin. So if they outperform Bitcoin for an extended period of time, the indicator ticks into alt season. If they underperform Bitcoin, the indicator ticks into Bitcoin season. The data that this index is looking at is if 75% of the top 50 coins performed better than Bitcoin over the last season. Top 50 coins, keep this in mind. This isn't talking about the small caps or the micro caps, so it's not encapsulating that full others index like we show on the channel. It's just the top 50. And although this is one indicator for altcoin season, and I definitely do look at it, a true altcoin season is actually a little bit different. And there is a misconception in the market of what a real altcoin season actually looks like. And in today's video, I'm going to unpack that and show you historically what a real altcoin season is. Now, I'm going to go through this research piece that I posted on my Twitter yesterday and summarize it for you guys today, because it does hold the key as to what you can expect over the next couple of quarters in crypto. Here's the truth. An alt season isn't a random occurrence. It's actually a distinct seasonal phenomenon between the months of January and May, which impact price action on Ethereum, which thus drives altcoins. So I'll highlight, before I get into the data, I'll highlight the flaw. The potential flaw with the argument I'm about to make is that Ethereum typically triggers an alt season. Whereas you might make the argument that Ethereum isn't as hot this cycle, so there'll be other triggers for an alt season. However, I do personally believe that Ethereum is still going to be a major trigger of alt season, and I would go so far as to say that we can't see a massive altcoin run unless Ethereum at least outperforms Bitcoin for a certain period of time. And that will obviously result in that decrease in dominance, which is this typical trigger that you look for, like Smiley Capital's anticipating over the next couple of quarters, to actually trigger alt season. So me personally, I am looking as one of the metrics at Ethereum outperforming Bitcoin and outperforming the market to dictate whether or not we are in an altcoin season. So getting that out of the way, let's actually look at what the data shows about when ETH outperforms the market and how that impacts the market and when it happens. So this whole research piece that I ended up coming up with and created the script for actually originated from when I was scrolling through my feed, this post from Aporia that said altcoin season is not merely a random period during which altcoins outperform Bitcoin, it's a distinct seasonal phenomenon from January to May. Now, the article that they posted was a research report from 2021. So what I actually did is I went through the report, I ran a script, and I added the recent data, so the last 3 years worth of data, to this to assert what actually happens during this period from January to May and whether or not it really is a true altcoin season trigger. The underlying thesis outlined in the report is quite simple. Alt season, using Ethereum as a proxy for alts, is when ETH significantly outperforms Bitcoin during the period of January to May. And I think this is where the misconception sometimes comes in. A lot of people are viewing altcoin season as this metric here. Whether or not 75% of the top 50 coins perform better than Bitcoin. Yes, that is one definition. However, historically, the big alt seasons you're thinking of, those crazy blow-off seasons like 2021, they happen when Ethereum outperforms Bitcoin over the first 2 quarters of the year. Those are the big altcoin seasons. Now, in 2021, we did also see a run in November, so alts can rally outside of this window, but the alt season that you're thinking of likely does occur during that early part of the year. And this is backed up by seasonal data that I want to go through now. So here were my findings from basically adding the new data and running a custom script based on this report that I found. The first takeaway, and there's 4 takeaways, is that there's a clear seasonal pattern. So Ethereum's returns spike considerably from January to May. This boost is nicknamed altseason, the altseason that you know and love. And it isn't just a random fluke. Statistical tests show that this has happened consistently over many years. This leads me to point number 2, which is that ETH averages around a 28% per month gain during this period. Obviously, that's skewed by some of the earlier years, so you're not expecting 28% month on month necessarily now, although it could happen, and that could be the trigger for ETH to go to $10,000 to $15,000. But the key point here is that during the other period of the year, it only averages a 3% return. So the majority of ETH's gains happen from that 5-month period from January to May. Number 3, Ethereum outperforms Bitcoin during this period. So during this period, and this is the trigger for alt season, ETH historically outperforms Bitcoin by around 20% per month during alt season, which does suggest that capital shifts from Bitcoin to ETH and alts in more speculative risk-on markets. Now, there has been a significant rally for Bitcoin off the back of the ETFs, off the back of the Sailor bid, off the back of this whole sovereign Bitcoin narrative. However, I actually think Ethereum is in a solid position to outperform due to the fact that you do have the regulatory landscape shift under Trump, which is aiding the case for DeFi. A lot of the wealth effect in DeFi and a lot of these funds are still built on Ethereum because it's the most decentralized layer 1 network, and it still has that moat in terms of being a trusted network. Yes, Solana has won over the retail traders. Yes, Solana has won over the Memecoin guys. But by and large, Ethereum is still going to capture the majority of that institutional capital. And for that reason, I think there is enough of an underlying narrative to potentially justify the seasonal outperformance that we have typically seen during this period. And that trigger could definitely be triggered by people rotating into Ethereum or bidding Ethereum over Bitcoin after Bitcoin's gone on such a massive run. Now, if you actually look at the alt Bitcoin bottoms, they line up very well with ETH's outperformance, or the beginning of ETH's outperformance. Because remember, Ethereum is maybe the trigger, that phase 2 trigger for a true alt season, but alts also start to get front run during this period and perform really well. And that's what triggers alt season. So you can actually look at last cycle as an example of this, and you can assert that a lot of these coins actually bottomed around now, in a couple weeks from now, versus Bitcoin. Their local bottom, that is, for the remainder of that cycle. So ETH BTC bottomed on December 27th, 2020. This is the halving year. Right now, we're also in a halving year. So the halvings were 2016, 2020, and 2024. 2021 was the post-halving year, just like 2025 is the post-halving year. And that historically has been the year where crypto's had its biggest gains. There's nothing to suggest that won't be the case for the remainder of this cycle either. So we also had RWA on January 3rd put in its bottom. We had Sol December 27th. We had BNB January 8th. We had AVAX December 30th. The list goes on and on and on for altcoins that actually put in their local bottoms last cycle. Now, we are reaching this period now within a couple of weeks where Bitcoin is actually now starting to outperform. But that shift back into Ethereum and altcoins could trigger a bunch of local bottoms. Now, I don't know necessarily whether it's going to be December 30th this year or January 3rd this year. But the important thing is, and the actionable part from your perspective is, we're in this general vicinity now where the shift starts to happen. So you need to be using these dominant spikes as opportunities to reposition in anticipation of that shift. And slightly later in today's video, I'll be going through the exact altcoins and the types of sectors that I think will see the strongest shift. But this is very interesting data from last cycle, which backs up the thesis today. And it just so happens that these shifts happen during risk-on markets, but right now, we're probably in one of the strongest risk-on environments that crypto's ever seen, with the Trump presidency, with the regulatory shift that comes off the back of that, with the Sailor Bitcoin bid, with accessibility to crypto via the ETFs, with the shift that's happening in the AI landscape, with the monetary policy and rate cuts that are currently happening. It feels like the stars are aligning for a bigger risk-on crypto environment, which combined with seasonality, which we're discussing now, could be the recipe for one of the biggest altcoin seasons ever. I'm not just saying this to sell you on a dream. I'm saying this because the data is in front of us. We have the macro data, which is in favor, and we also have the historical data, which is in favor. It's a different set of circumstances now that's driving the market versus 2021, but nonetheless, it's a separate set of powerful circumstances. So now I think the name of the game is being a little bit patient, because there are going to be periods, probably for the next couple of weeks, but maybe even during times in January and even slightly later, where Bitcoin has these periodic periods of outperformance. No one's saying it'll just go down only, right? In terms of Bitcoin dominance. It might go like this, and then it might come back down and then bounce and then make a lower low. The idea is that from this point onwards in the cycle, we should see this trend of dominance decreasing continue to establish itself. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be periods where dominance goes up. It's actually healthy for that to happen, because the more liquidity that flows into Bitcoin, the more liquidity that's going to go into alts. So you shouldn't be looking at Bitcoin pumping as a bad thing. If altcoins are dropping a little bit when Bitcoin's pumping, you should be looking at this as a good thing, because the more this happens periodically, the more it prolongs the cycle. Whereas if we had started instantly just nuking on BTC dominance and we went like this, you might be really happy in the short term, right? Because yes, it's alt season, we're making money, but longer term, this is worse for you. You have less time to position, you have less time to rotate, and more people are going to get wrecked, because it's going to cause a lot more FOMO, and the rallies won't even be as big because Bitcoin hadn't gone up enough to justify a bigger rally. You need wealth effect going into Bitcoin to justify bigger altcoin runs. So this pattern that we are currently seeing is actually a very good thing for altcoins. And I want to show you what actually happened in 2021 just for a little bit. It's the exact same period, and it's actually uncanny how similar the price action looks. You have dominance spiking, and then you have a drop in dominance around the December period, which is what we saw. Then we saw this second thrust up until December 28th, that post-Christmas period, and then that was the ultimate reversal into a big altcoin season. And you even saw this period where alts and Bitcoin were fighting and going back and forth until this big May blow off. And then it went back and forth again, and then you had the second blow off. Price action now is pretty similar in the sense that you've had the dominance rise, then you've had the drop, now we're having this second impulse. It might even last longer into Christmas, and then at some point, I don't know whether it's going to be December 28th again, it could be January 10th, it could be January 20th, it doesn't matter. History rhymes, it doesn't repeat. At some point soon, we'll see the shift to the downside again. And that's where your positioning during the dominance rises will come to fruition, and you'll make a lot of money on altcoins. So the reason I'm making this video primarily is to show you that although this time is different, it actually isn't that different based on the historical data. Bitcoin dominance looks really similar. The Bitcoin trend looks really similar. And the historical data has always pointed to the fact that the true alt season happens in the first 2 quarters of the year. So why are we seeing panic right now when we're seeing healthy and normal market rotation that actually primes a bigger alt season? It's actually a really, really good thing right now. So now let's go into what you can do practically to prepare for this eventuality, given the rough thesis that we should see a bigger alt season in Q1/Q2 next year. Well, the first thing that I want to really prioritize here is asset selection. Asset selection is super, super important, because the main difference between this cycle and last cycle is that there are many more altcoins this cycle versus the last one, which means you need to really pinpoint the outperformers, coins with a strong narrative, strong community, and strong mind share. These are going to outperform versus last cycle, where you could literally invest in anything and make money. It's easier to launch tokens now with pump fun. There's more dilution now because insiders have worked out that you can make a bunch of money from launching tokens. So more tokens are being launched. So even though there's maybe more people coming into the space and more liquidity coming into the space, this is being counterbalanced by the amount of new projects that are launching and just the amount of aggregate projects in the space, especially with all the meme coins. So for that reason, there's a huge premium on asset selection. So I really want you to focus, right, on crafting a high conviction portfolio where you believe in every single coin, but every single coin has a great unique narrative, fits a need in your portfolio, you have a lot of conviction in it, and it has shown signs during rallies so far this cycle that that narrative actually outperforms. So you're not in a bunch of weak stuff that's actually going to underperform during alt season. Because imagine how bad that would be. Getting to alt season, after all this rigmarole, you actually knew what was happening in terms of timing, but you fumbled the bag because you're in the wrong assets. So what are some of the right assets? that I would look at accumulating. You can also see RV here saying, people debating the start of alt season are simply deranged in the head, as the disagreements are simply a matter of days apart. Pick your spots, accumulate your favorites, and make sure you're done buying by the new year. That's all. Honestly, that's a pretty simple plan. So what should you be buying? What should you be looking at during dips? And yes, I do believe this dip is a decent one to ladder into. Could alts technically go down another 20%? Sure, be mentally prepared for that. But if our seasonality thesis is correct, the best should be ahead of us, and thus, this is one of your latter opportunities to actually accumulate stuff you're missing. So let's go through some sectors. The first sector I want to pinpoint is AI. This is a sector that I have probably the most conviction in, because I really think there's been a paradigm shift this cycle with an AI focus specifically on AI agents, but it's also one of those narratives that's just so hot in the real world. It makes so much sense for this to transverse into crypto and lead to a really big AI crypto bubble, because crypto has so much liquidity, it has so much mind share. You combine that with AI, you're going to see a lot of AI protocols really flying this cycle. So AI, I've put a lot of conviction into. I don't know what percentage of my portfolio it is, but it's over 25 to 30%. It's a large chunk, and that's because I think some of the biggest gainers are going to be in AI. And also, it's not fully consensus yet. Not everyone's in it. It still has some pushback from a lot of like crypto normies and a lot of like even the meme guys that don't want to buy AI stuff, which I like. I don't like when everyone's on side, but not everyone's on side with AI. So I would be really looking at positioning in some of these tokens. I'm not going to speak about all of them today because I've already done videos on this. My last video showed my latest accumulation list. I talk about it every week. I won't bore you, but AI is definitely a sector that I've been looking into. I actually recently found a new AI project that I'm going to be sharing in the alpha channel of the Mars High Club. This is my latest big AI position. It's probably one of the biggest positions that I've put into any AI project in the last few weeks. So it's meaningful, and I'm going to be sharing that first in the Mars High Club actually today. Within the next 24 hours of releasing this video, it'll be shared in there. So if you do want access to that early, eventually I'll go through the full thesis on YouTube and on Twitter. You can use the link in the description below, sign up for the Mars High Club, come be a part of the community. And that's a project that I thought was really, really, really cool because they were combining strong AI tech, because they were combining really strong tech from the Web 2 world and bringing that to Web 3, using a token basically as a way to get mindshare and market the underlying product, which is really smart. Because when you think about it, if you're competing with the ChatGPT, right, and you're offering a subscription service, how do you differentiate yourself? Like, you can run Google ads, sure, but it probably won't be as effective as launching a token in one of the hottest markets in the world, which is crypto right now, one of the biggest liquid markets. If you can nail the marketing on the token side, you bring a bunch of eyeballs and awareness to your product, which means you can bootstrap that first 20 to 1,000 users way easier because they're financially incentivized via holding the token versus like running ads and trying to compete with subscription services. So it makes a lot of sense to launch a token, not for the sake of launching a token, but to gain a strong edge on the marketing front to market your underlying product. That's why I think you're going to see a lot of these really top AI projects from Web 2 actually rebranding or launching in Web 3. And I found one of them. That big PhD university students and professors were working on, and that I'm going to share, as I said, in the Discord in the next 24 hours. So there's a link in the description below if you want to join. But AI is definitely one of those sectors. Another sector that I'm really highly convicted in right now is RWA. Alongside AI, this is my second biggest sector in terms of niche sectors, not infrastructure, because the regulatory framework right now with Trump is probably in the strongest place it's ever been to facilitate real-world asset development and asset tokenization. And because of that, the demand for this is really increasing. I've seen this because, for example, CHEX, was a Chintai, a project I'm invested in. I've seen their pipeline. It's absolutely mental. Billions of dollars of capital being tokenized, coming on chain, because now these companies feel like the regulatory environment is actually conducive for this. Whereas a few months ago, pre-Trump, they weren't comfortable doing it. I don't think the market's caught up to this yet. I don't think the market has realized at all what's actually happening behind the scenes. And because I'm very involved behind the scenes as well, I've been talking to the CHEX team, I've been getting the updates, I'm seeing what's happening. It's mind-blowing. I was also a seed investor in ONDO. I've also been a Mantra investor for quite some time. I really like PENDLE as well. I've seen what's happening behind the scenes, and RWA, genuinely, alongside AI, has me the most excited of any sector. And specifically, CHEX, CPOOL, PINLINK, these are a few projects that I like in that space, but specifically CHEX in terms of the pipeline. I do like. I'm just giving you token examples right now, but obviously there are more. Memes as well. I think memes at some point still come back. They've been the dominant narrative of this cycle. Yes, they've cooled off, but that spells opportunity. Just high level, looking at some of the leaders now, POPCAT's now sub $1 billion. At one point, it was at the same market cap as WIF almost. It's crashed down way below. That could be an opportunity. Mu, there's a real thing right now with IP. There's a big IP narrative, and Mu actually owns all their IP, which is super important. They're creating their own world, their own universe. And a lot of these other projects have just stolen IP. And I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing POPCAT struggle and why you're seeing Peanut starting to sell off, because there's a legal risk there of A, getting sued, and B, if you don't actually own the IP, do you own the project? That's a genuine question. So I think there's going to be an IP narrative around getting into the projects which own their IP and have unique IP. And you could definitely make an argument coins like Mu are going to benefit from that. Obviously, a coin like PEPE is always going to be well known. MOG as well. These are well known, recognizable jokes / memes in the world. But yeah, a lot of these protocols now at heavy discounts versus what they were a few months ago. They might be slow movers, but if you have patience, I think you'll be rewarded for that. Keyword patience, like Lucky Coin, for example. Is it down since I mentioned it on the YouTube channel? Yes. I mentioned it at $9. It's now $6.79. I did mention it a bit earlier in Discord at $4, but I understand not everyone got in that early. But if you have patience, I think this is a narrative that is going to come back. It's actually one that I have a lot of conviction in. I haven't sold a cent. I bought transparently at $2.50. I'm still holding, haven't sold a cent. Now I'm actually buying more because I do believe it's a good opportunity. With a lot of these memes, you need to have patience. Lucky isn't in isolation. All of these memes are down. POPCAT's down 50%, right? It's all of these memes are down, and all of them are getting hit because memes aren't hot right now. But my bet is that at some point they're going to come back. So actually, if you still have conviction in an asset at a lower price, it's an even better buy than it was a few weeks ago. If you're questioning your conviction on a coin like Lucky, for example, it's because you never had conviction in the first place. Your conviction was based on price. If your conviction is based on your underlying belief, the lower a project goes, the more conviction you should have. And that's kind of what's happening with me and Lucky Coin here, and me and Mu here, and me and Mog here, and me and a bunch of projects. I'm getting more conviction as price goes lower. Because execution is a major part of crypto. A good token at a bad price is a bad buy, but a bad token at a good price is a good buy. So you have to reframe your thinking. I'm not saying any of them are bad tokens, by the way, but you have to reframe your thinking in terms of judging good buys, not based on the underlying fundamentals, but also based on the token price, which also means if the fundamentals haven't changed, if they're the exact same as they were a month ago, but the price is lower, that makes it a good buy, or at least a better buy relative to what it was. So I think the number one mistake crypto traders make when they come into the market, especially the newbies, is execution. They don't know how to execute on trading. It's not just about asset selection, it's about pairing that with good execution. And right now, objectively, you're getting better execution on some of these projects than you were whilst they were pumping a couple of weeks ago. And I know it's hard to grapple with this FOMO because most people are conditioned to buy the highs, but if you want to succeed in crypto, you need to buy the lows. That starts by working out what you're fundamentally bullish on, and then you need to come up with a plan to accumulate that asset at the lowest possible cost basis. And if you can execute that, you'll make money in crypto. If you can't execute on that, it doesn't matter what assets you buy. If you're buying at the wrong time, you're probably not going to succeed. Now, because the bull market might rise all ships, you might get away with it, right? But if you really want to outperform, you can't get away with sloppy execution. You need strong execution. And then the last sector is quite obvious. It's DeFi. Coins like Athena, coins like Rune, Hyperliquid, I think they're all going to do well. Even Chainlink, maybe it won't 10x, but it's still got good upside from here. DeFi is another sector that I'm looking at. So AI, L1s, Memecoins, RWA, I think if you can build a good portfolio amongst these sectors, you'll do really well. Obviously, there's gaming as well, but the main thing that you should be focusing on is accumulating tokens you have high conviction in. Don't buy into a token just because I have conviction in it, or anyone. Don't watch Ran Crypto Banter and buy something because he has conviction in it. Don't watch Altcoin Daily and buy something because they have conviction in it. Don't watch Coin Bureau and buy something because they have conviction in it. Take that information and decide yourself whether you have conviction in it. I've talked about CHEX a lot on this channel, and yes, it is up. But if you don't have conviction in the RWA narrative, don't buy CHEX just because I talked about it. I've spoken about Lucky Coin on the channel. It's now down since I mentioned it on the YouTube channel. If you have conviction in it, you might think this is a buying opportunity. But if you don't buy it just because I talked about it. Don't buy anything just because anyone talked about it. Buy it because you like it. Be responsible for your own decisions, and then take credit for your own decisions, and don't give credit to someone else. My job on the channel is to give you opportunities that I think are good based on my research from myself and my team. Your job is to take that information and filter it and make an investment decision, taking that information into account, but then putting your own beliefs into the frame and focusing on your own trading execution. Because if you really want to succeed this cycle, you need to have conviction, or you're going to get chopped up, especially in a period where dominance is increasing. You can get chopped out of positions. But the TLDR from today's video is that the true alt season hasn't actually begun, and based on historical data, it could be happening very, very soon. So instead of panicking, start planning for that. And I think you'll be in a much better position in a few months' time. If you want to join the Mars High Club, I'll leave a link in the description below. Come be a part of that community. I will be hand-holding you guys a little bit more alongside the traders over the next few weeks, because this is a very important accumulation period. And part of that is going to be me sharing one of the new coins I took a big position in. And I'll keep you updated in the Alpha channel if I add any major positions or make big shifts to my portfolio. I'll see you in the next video. Have a lovely rest of your day. Peace out.